topic today is trust. And the reason I wanted to talk about trust is because it's central to civilization. You know, everything that we are as social beings, and that's what allows and almost dictates that we have civilization is trust. Everybody in a tribe, a nation state, or internation states, they can only do things together to the degree that they trust each other. And there have been lots of experiments and lots of let's say experiences surrounding trust, and a lot of people have different ideas about trust. So what I wanted to do today is to explore trust and the idea of trust with you guys. So my first question would be, how do you define trust?
I think I learned to trust too easily as a child and carried that for a long time. And I had a tendency to trust too much, too often, people without questioning or watching or, making a judgment call about it. And I guess the definition at that time in my life was that the person was safe, that I was safe, and what they said was true.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can extend, maybe to help us to explore the meaning of trust, we can extend it past humans, okay? Because humans are a little bit complicated. And so we can say a bridge, if you're going to go across the bridge, do you trust it? We see a bridge, we drive over bridges all the time. And most of the time we don't go out and try to do some kind of test on it. We just start doing it. I mean, we just drive over it or we walk over it. So we trust that bridge. So with that kind of idea in mind, if you would like to use that, I don't want to guide what you think. So what is trust to you? Hello, we got a new BP tour. Who's that? I can't see you. You're in the shadow. Still can't see you. There's no light on your face. Oh, there you go. Hey.
Hey.
I see you, but I do not know you. I'm Betty.
I'm Betty. I'm Allison.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Allison.
Allison's been to South Dakota before. She's one of my longtime friends.
Oh.
She actually did an art exhibit at the gallery, at the ARC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So she's kind of one of us, and she of course is one of me. So she's.
We all are.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. Okay. So at any rate, Allison, we're talking about trust, and we're talking about we're trying to define it. I'd like to hear different people's idea of what it is to them. How do you define it?
Oh, what was that Supreme Court justice who says, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it?
Yeah.
I'm struggling
here with pornography?
Trust. I know what trust is, but to put it into words, is much harder.
Mm-hmm. I think the reason I like to start off with definitions, is because often when we talk about things, especially complex things, and especially those that are familiar in a way that we all have this idea, as Enno said, that we know what it is, but do we have a mutual idea of what it is? And that's what makes it
Maybe,
workable. Yeah, Allison.
maybe the absence of doubt.
Oh,
Okay.
Um,
I was going to
because
say,
that kind of goes back to like you can feel it and you know it when you have it, like love or something. You know it, but you can't really define it, and that is kind of an absence of doubt.
Hmm.
You know, that you don't have a lingering something in there telling you or asking you, could this be true, or could this be? I mean, I think we can suspend those things when we need to, just for the collective good of trusting that our government is going to take care of us or something. I don't know.
Mhm.
You know, and still have some feelings of doubt, you know, but for pure just trust would be to know it fully without any doubt. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
interesting.
Anyone else?
Playing off of yeah, kind of like the never doubt, but what Betty was saying about being too trusting in some relationships, and Lauren saying trusting that the bridge isn't going to collapse when you drive across it. You know, it's to trust someone or something is to give your life, or trust your, yeah, you have to use the using it in there, but you know, I'm going to trust that this person is going to hurt me. I'm going to trust that this bridge is going to hold up. I'm going to, you know, it's kind of like never doubting,
Mhm.
but there's also that you're putting yourself out there,
Mhm.
on the bridge. You're putting yourself on the bridge. You're putting yourself out there into relationships. So you're making yourself vulnerable.
Mhm. So I guess it comes back to kind of what Allison was saying. You're willing to do that because you don't have doubt, right? You at least suspended your doubt, even if you had it. You're in the case that you say, hey, I have to go along with this. You're suspending it, maybe conditionally even, but it is the absence in some form of doubt. Muy bien. Would anybody disagree with that or have something to add to that?
I'm just thinking now off the top of my flat head, trust maybe could be a mutual decision, just like between two people. That I'm going to trust you because we care for each other, and I know you have my best at heart. That would be a very considered, probably, kind of trust that would develop.
Well, kind of going back to, I don't know everybody's name, but the gentleman in the orange shirt, going back to what you,
He's Mr. Aberdeen, Green Aberdeen. No,
sorry,
that's
I'm
NO.
2 hours earlier and I just had to do my grocery store shopping, which was 2 hours in San Francisco lines. But, so maybe the trust, the thing that you suspend is you're willing to, the conditional thing, maybe there might be a little bit of doubt, or you can accept that there is some risk in it by crossing the bridge or whatever, but you're willing to, you've balanced it, and maybe that's one side of trust. One is completely the absence of doubt. And the other one, the other perimeter of trust is that you would lay your life on it. You're willing to suspend your life. Like if you, for instance, the extreme of that is if there is no trust, you're not going to go there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people might, I don't know, but you know, you're not willing to suspend the potential for losing your life, because the outcome the belief or the trust is greater
Mhm.
than the fear,
Yeah, the cost.
the
Could
cost.
be wrong, yeah.
Yeah.
Trust but verify comes to mind. We used to hear that when I was not going through hippiedom because I was too busy with raising children. But I think that's where I first started hearing that, you know, sort of teaching me eventually to not just take everything at face value or the way I heard it to be trustable.
And verification could be a way to solidify trust, or it's the step you take to solidify or at least adjust your level of trust. Because the verify means that, okay, I'm trusting, just sort of like I'm just giving the trust because I'm going to suspend doubt. However, since could be a downside to this, I want to find reasons to trust as opposed to just blindly trusting. So the verification would be the next step to solidify that trust. And if the more you can find reasons to believe that you can trust, the more solid that trust is. Getting to, it's not a one thing, trust or not trust. It seems that the consensus here is that there are different levels of trust. There's, you know, just you trust this person, or the bridge implicitly. And usually, you know, that's what we want to, actually, that's what I want to get to next. And that is, how do we gain trust, or how do we come to trust something or someone? What are the elements that go into that?
Do you mind if I put forth one issue of trust right now that kind of is one that I'm suspending at this very moment, and that's my trust of Zoom.
Oh, okay.
Like, if I had to peel off my little sticker over the camera, because I feel like this free software is getting all this, we're willingly giving over all our facial recognition, all this stuff. So to go on Zoom, I'm really suspending a lot of trust. And yet but I'm doing that for the sake of, I trust Lawrence Diggs and the conversation that you're going to have, and I want to be supportive of that. So
Sure.
I'm saying,
Are you saying you trust Lawrence more than you trust Zoom? But
yeah.
Okay, so
I'm weighing it in the balance, right?
Yeah. So
my distrust and trust are having a battle right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a very legitimate concern, and it's one that I've had, and it's one that I've actually been in contact with Zoom about. And they had a webinar yesterday with the chairman of Zoom and a lot of people who work in his staff, and they were I thought they made a good case for, look, we weren't this kind of company before. We basically got thrust into being this kind of company. And the clients we had before, we suspended a lot of the security things, because since they were high-end clients and only the people that they worked with were the ones that could access them, then we felt we could suspend those security things because we expected those people to police their ecosystem, and their ecosystem was locked into them. Somebody from outside had no idea they were doing it, let alone what time and when. If you didn't get the secret handshake, you didn't know. So yes, we had those kind of security things, and they were issues, but they were not issues for us. And that's why we felt we could be lax on them. Now, suddenly, we are not just that. We didn't design our system for that, but people found our system. And under this circumstances, how could we say no when people are saying, hey, we want to use it for school. We want to like use it for our family reunion. So what are we supposed to say? No, that you can't use our thing. And so yeah, we're adjusting, and here are the people that we've recently hired, and these are their credentials to try to make it better. In the meantime, here's some things you can do, because we have a 90-day plan. We can't rewrite our code right away. So there's going to be some things that, that people are going to be trying to find ways to exploit our system. We know that, and we're working on it. That's one of those things when it gets like, okay, well, what makes you trust or not trust? It's like if somebody says, hey, look, we have a problem. It's a new thing for us. Our option is we can shut it all down, but then we feel like that's while we fix it, but we think that would be disruptive. So what we're doing is we're putting in some things, like I have right now a little button on you may not see it on yours. Do you have a thing that says security on yours? A little shield? Just to the left of participants. So I have that as the host, I have that. When I click on that, it gives me some options that if somebody's on like Zoom bombing, or it's like they suddenly start putting pornography in the background or something like that, which was one of the things that was happening to them, I can eject those people now.
Oh.
Or if somebody's like, you say, well, where'd this guy come from? Then I can just say, okay, this person is out of there. So we didn't have that button before. There was a way to do it, but we could shut that person off. But because they never really had to do that, they didn't, that button wasn't there. But now it's there, and they said, well, and we're going to have more stuff like that. But this is what we can do in the meantime. I said, okay, well, based on how important this is at this moment, and they're saying, well, okay, I will, we'll do something about it. Okay, you admitted that it wasn't, that you were weak in that point. You explained why you were weak in that point. It wasn't because
Yes, I
you
could
didn't
wear
care.
a mask.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I was going to show up with mine today. Connie's making masks.
So anyway, I'm glad you brought that up, Allison, because it is a thing, and it needed to be discussed.
Yeah, it was good.
That's good to hear.
I thought you were joking about the eject button when we first convened today.
Oh, no. I was happy. I just say I feel powerful now. I can eject.
Yeah. Now I'm going to put it on just for a minute. Allison, the other participant whom you haven't heard much from yet is Connie, and she's been diligently, avidly, generously making masks and giving them away. And
Oh, that's nice.
yeah, it's very nice. I changed my setup here, so now I want to change it back there. We all are.
You look so pretty, Betty.
I know, it's a real improvement. And the other side is the other side. So
Wow.
Yeah.
isn't it great? I haven't really gone anywhere in it yet, but I'm at the ready.
The new ones are more boring, Betty. I've got white on the back side. Well, I don't have this one turned, but they're white on one side and then colored on the other.
That's all right.
So they're not as pretty reversible as yours are. I was running
Okay, so anyway, I wanted to get back to what are the kinds of things that you feel make you trust people or make you trust things?
when they do you no harm. But those that do you harm, you don't trust. Harm verbally, harm physically, that kind of thing.
Well, not necessarily even the ones that do you harm, but how do they react to other people, or react to people that are not within their own circle, because some people can be really nice to their immediate people, but may treat somebody that's on the street really poorly, and it's not necessarily how does somebody react to me that gives me trust, but it's also how do they react to other people.
Yeah, that's really critical to me too. I didn't always think about that so much, but I don't even have to think about it now. I think I have a sense of it. Sometimes maybe wrong, but It's very important. Observation of how people be.
There's also words and actions. I mean, just a simple thing. Hey, Lawrence, let's meet tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock for coffee. And then Lawrence doesn't show up until 11:30 and says, well, where were you?
Right.
I mean, that
Consistency,
isn't really hurting me, but but the next time he says, let's meet for coffee, I have to decide, am I going to trust that he's going to show up on time, or am I going to try to show up later and hopefully catch him, or am I just going to say, sorry, I can't do it?
right? Do their words match their actions? I've got to go get my power cord. I'm on 5%.
Should we trust her on that?
Oh, that's good. Mhm.
Anyone else?
Well, I guess it kind of counter to what Allison suggested. I do tend to judge by how people treat me or speak to me. That's part of my deciding if I'm going to trust them or if I'm going to investigate it a little more before I decide they're not worthy of my trust, or just be careful. So there are a lot of ways, I guess.
Well, my sister's scenario thing is a good deal of trust. My sisters think since all of a sudden they've turned around, now all of a sudden I'm supposed to just trust that they're going to be nice to me and they're going to be decent human beings to me and to others. I don't trust them. I'm trying to go along with them, but I don't trust them. So how do you develop trust once it's been taken away?
Well,
That's hard.
Yeah, we're going to move to that because I think that's a critical thing. But I wanted to first establish, one, what we're talking about is trust, and then two, what makes us trust someone or something. One of my mentors once put it like this. He said, everything in human relationships comes down to threat and non-threat. And if you feel something threatens you or could threaten you, you don't like it much. And if you feel like that thing can't or won't hurt me, you like it. And he made the example of, like, he said, like most people like babies. Even people who don't want to have babies, they kind of like babies because babies don't pose any threat. However, if you hand someone a baby that baby pees on them, the baby's just doing what it wants to do, but now they have a certain kind of apprehension. They don't trust that baby anymore because the baby might pee on them. Or let's say, for example, like I'm not very fond of cats. Now, I don't dislike cats because of how they look or how they walk or how they smell or anything like that, or they've never really said anything bad about me or to me. It's just that whenever cats come around, they like me, so they like to jump on me, and a lot of times they miss and their claws go right into me. And after that's happened 2 or 3 times, I just am kind of nervous when I see a cat in the room because I don't trust them, because they're not kind of like dogs. They kind of like like they do their own thing and they're in kind of their own world and they may let you in, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So while I don't dislike cats, I don't trust cats. Mm-hmm. I mean, does that make any sense?
Yep. Been there.
Based on how they look and perhaps 1 or 2 previous experiences you've had with something that looked and acted like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also with that's interesting what you're saying about threat. If there's something that poses threat, maybe you don't trust it. But also, you can't always trust your own perception, because that it could just be a perceived threat, and the threat might be really your fear, your own fear. So it might be your own inability to recognize threat and non-threat.
Well, that's one of the things you also pointed out, is that human beings are very poor at threat analysis. You know, the things that are really harmful to them, they don't recognize that threat, and things that really don't present much of a threat, they often feel threatened by it. One of my martial arts instructor used to always say, "Miss by an inch, miss by a mile." And what he meant by that is most things are not a threat to you. When people say things to you that, you know, like, you know, say, call you names or something like that, you have to, your mind, to develop the mind that sees whether or not, can this thing hurt me? Or is it not, is it just like ramblings of an idiot that has nothing to do with me? That person, or people make mistakes about judging me. So does my blood pressure need to change about that? So it's like threat analysis is, as both of them kind of put out, it's something that would be good for us to develop, but typically human beings are kind of poor at it.
Mm.
So
A little saying it just went through my mind from when I was a kid. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. But those names always did hurt me, and I'd always say that to my mom. But it does hurt, but it shouldn't, because it's just a word. It's not a stick.
Yeah.
It didn't land well on my young ears.
Mhm.
Yeah. But I think sometimes when we hear that, what we hear is that the other person is a potential threat. And they may be a potential threat, but only under which conditions, and what can I do to ameliorate the threat? That kind of process we don't go through. Or if that person, if that's all they're doing, you know, how they say barking dogs never bite until they stop barking. So, you know, so it's like, well, how do you know if this person is just just rambling or just ranting, or are they building up to the point that they want to, that they will threaten me physically? Those are the kind of analyses that we don't really get a lot of practice and guidance, even between each other, in like, well, okay, that person is calling me a name. Like, well, how can I know? How can I know now if I should just like move out of this, or how do I de-escalate? How do I react to this so that they're no longer a threat? But the potential threat gets back to the trust thing. Just because they could threaten me, or they could harm me, does that, I'm guessing that we're saying that plays into whether or not we trust or not, the potential for harm.
were you building towards something with this idea with trust?
Yes. Okay. So the idea about trust and why it's important is because our relationships, and indeed civilization, depends on trust. For example, we use pieces of paper for this thing called money, and we trust that if I give you this piece of paper, you will do something or give me something uh, for this piece of paper. The paper has no intrinsic value. It's virtually worthless. And I could regale you with stories of how I've experienced it being virtually worthless. But because we trust that when I go to the store, if I give them this piece of paper, they will give me some goods, or that if I go to this place and give people this piece of paper, my lights and gas and water will come on. And because over and over that has in fact happened, you know, we have gone to the store, we give them this piece of paper, we walk out with oranges and bread, and we could not have, for the time it took us to make that paper, it would be hard to realize how we could grow the oranges and or get the flour and all of the things together to make the bread, you know, for it. So we learn to trust the money because people don't say, we don't take that. But I have been in countries where they have changed the currency, and you walk in with that currency and people say, we don't take that. So I've been in that situation. So I know that it's just that we trust that we can use that too, right? So the idea of trust means that it's, in a very practical sense, we have to believe that certain things will happen, and we have to trust that when we flip a switch, lights are going to come on. If it can't be like, like you turn it on sometimes and it happens, and we can say, well, if the power company is working today, then the lights will come on. And I've been in countries where that's been a case. We turn on the water, we just trust it's going to come out.
Right.
I've been in countries where you turn it on and it does come out.
So trust is a shortcut, that's necessary for living. Because if we questioned everything, which
Yes.
then we wouldn't get very far. I mean, we'd be occupied with too much thinking. So you have to just trust that that maybe you don't necessarily have to trust what you're giving it, but that you can trust yourself to deal with it if it doesn't get what you need. Yeah, like it's a lot of colliding trust.
Yeah, but you mentioned something earlier too, Allison, about suspending it. And I think that a lot of times when we are faced with things that starts to bringing the doubt that you talked about before, we sometimes suspend the doubt in order to trust, because not trusting has greater downsides than suspending the doubt that we imagine the suspension of doubt will have.
Mm-hmm. It's also consistency. Like if something happens over and over again, then you forget whether you should trust or not. Like that's like branding, like Fruit of the Loom. A lot of people trust the quality, even though they start in the last 5 years, everything starts unraveling, but you've grown up trusting this company, and no, so you just kind of forget, over time. That's what consistency does, is it builds your trust. So far it can build your trust so much that even the slackening off of that consistency will take you a while before you give up that trust. So consistency is probably the biggest builder of trust. And real trust, I mean, and I think those that manipulate you want to make you forget to question.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Because really that is trust, is letting go of your questioning thing, because that takes a lot of brain power to go through it, which I think in the animal world, it's probably tied to instinct too, like an observation and really being in touch with everything around you, because your life depended on it. Like your fear and all that stuff. But we've done civilization is about reducing all or kind of cutting off our fears, like so that we do trust,
Reducing the anxiety so you can.
Yeah, but it's also a cutting off of our intuition as well, and we can be controlled mostly if we no longer have our intuition. If we've totally suppressed it, then we can blindly trust, because we don't no longer even recognize that intuition, or we doubt it. We doubt our own questioning, So that can go back to those relationships, those harmful relationships, if that maybe in retrospect, if you get into an abusive relationship, you knew from the very first time you met that person that there might have been something in there that it should have been a red flag, but you have learned to distrust your own instincts so much that you just kind of suppressed it, you know, and kind of blindly went into it. And then maybe in retrospect, but that's kind of sums up civilization too, is like a repression. You give up fear and all this other stuff, you're also suppressing your instinct. So it's a very delicate balance.
I think, Allison, you've brought up two words that would merit a lot of discussion too, to come to an agreement or understanding, or even you know, ourselves, and it would be instinct and intuition. I don't know if either of those are considered scientific, or if they're just things that we kind of make up to get by, or what they are.
Well, it's very much tried to trust too, that feeling, you know it when you know it, you know, is really, and knowing is really about your instinct, intuition.
But
I can,
no, go ahead, Enno.
but I trust that when I hear President Trump talking about he'll make his decisions based on his instincts, that it will probably be the wrong decision.
Oh, you sage, you prophet, you.
I mean, yeah, no, but it is. I mean, that's well, when are we going to open? Well, I'm going to talk to a bunch of experts, but really, it's going to end up my own instinct, because I trust that more than anything else.
Well, yes, but that's also the observation. We've seen how he's treated other people, his business dealings, women, and everything else, to know that if, you know, that he can say something to us, you know, individually. If I met him, he might say something nice until I gave him an indication, maybe I don't trust him, you know, but that doesn't mean anything, because I've observed how he treated others, you know, so you cannot trust someone for their face value if they have proven over and over again, consistently, you know, that they're untrustworthy.
But continue in the political side just for a moment, though, it's very interesting that my right-wing conservative friends say that liberals are unthinking and they just follow whatever leader, either Hillary or Obama or whatever. And my left-leaning friends say they all follow Trump. You know, I mean, they're both, they accuse each other of the exact same thing, of not having any intuition, of not having any critical thinking, of not having.
Yeah, but then
and so they don't trust each other.
Right.
And so we don't trust each other.
Exactly. But the other thing is, once someone says, hey, that's why I feel this way, or this is how I feel, then we have to do critical analysis on, is that in fact what's happening? You know, in other words, if somebody says, hey, you know, these people just follow these people blindly, and you say, okay, well, give me some examples of that. And even if you find one person, you should say, well, how many people? You know, are people actually critical of that? Do people actually ask, you know? But I think that gets down to, I guess it gets down, I point to that because in terms of instinct and intuition, I think that those things are like beginning points, and they are things that come into our subliminal view, and we don't have enough data at first to like evaluate something. So what we call instinct is often like practice. In other words, let's say, for example, my example with the cats. Okay, so if every time, you know, or every other time, or even every fifth time, a cat sees me, they like me, they decide they want me to hold them, and they jump on me, but they miss, you know, then after a while, I start to distrust that. So I can point to that and say, okay, this is based on this kind of experience. However, the next cat I meet may not be that kind of cat, you know? Maybe that cat is more sure-footed and they'll jump on you, but they're not going to, you know, they're not going to claw you.
or you can turn inward and go, why do so many cats miss my lap? Am I automatically assuming I don't like cats, so I flinch? So when they get up to me, I
Yeah. It could be that too. It could be that too.
I'm
But
just saying
but it is.
that's a deep hole to go down. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's my reaction to them is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
My reaction may not have anything to do with that particular cat, and it may not be applicable to that particular cat or any of the cats, you know. But that is the instinct. That is the, you know, let's say that my instinct is to, let's say if a dog shows his teeth, my instinct is to think that this dog sees me as a threat anyway, and because, or if they make a certain kind of sound, right? Those are my instincts. But then my instincts have to be, at least for me, I like to think my instinct have to be checked with rational thought when I can do it. Sometimes we don't have time or the processing power to look at all of the different
Not
potential.
important.
That's right. So we just go with what we
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah. So Green Aberdeen.
Say that again.
Green Aberdeen.
My name is Enno,
No, okay. No.
spelled E-N-N-O, Enno.
No, okay. So getting back to that right wing and left wing and stuff, since that's a very practical topic, you know, that we can all relate to, you know, and I guess all we can do to break through to gain trust in those situations is to acknowledge, yes, maybe there's always the team players that no matter what, for right or wrong, they're going to be loyal to their team on either side. So there can be truth to that. So I think it's whenever that thing comes up, it's just like an acknowledgement. Okay, maybe there are team players that won't just do that, but let's remove that. And by acknowledging it, you can remove that's a sticking point or something. Like, okay, well, let's move on. Let's acknowledge, yeah, there's the team players on one side, and maybe that is one group of people, and they are the same. Maybe there isn't. I mean, they aren't the same, but there is a suspension, you know, on either side of, you know, because because you have to acknowledge there are team players on both sides that, for right or wrong, no matter what they hear, are not going to be able to acknowledge, you know, the other. So, so maybe even acknowledging that maybe that's a truth, then you can say, well, let's get on with it. So what are the real topics about that we need to hear? You know, like to try to find common down, like, oh yeah, that's the other, but here we are, you know, we are not that. So now let's, you know, it's a way of bridging that gap of us and them, you know.
At least you take that.
Putting that, I don't know if I'm making sense.
Well, I think
here.
if I'm understanding you, we can take that off the table by just saying, yep, that's true in all situations. You will find those people, but that's not what we're talking about now. Or that is, we'll agree that for the sake of discussion that is true.
Or I agree with you. You know, like that's an easy agree point.
Yeah.
You know, I agree with you. That's true. So let's talk about, you know, the here and now. That's not what I think. You know, let's think about this.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, last night, I would say he's more of a libertarian. Will Brown, I don't know if you guys know, but he's a local musician. I think he works at West Fargo Bank, but he's a libertarian, and he says, "How come liberals want more government, but then they're complaining that Trump has too much control? How do you reconcile that?" You know, and so I wrote to him and I said, Well, for me, government isn't the president. Government is the president, vice president, the Senate, the House, the, you know, and I just listed this all the way down to the local city government. I said, this is the whole.
To the voter.
This is the whole of government. The government does not rest in the president. And then I said, you know, and for me, being a liberal, I said, for me, it's about balance. And I said, for one example, if a multi-billion corporation has a factory in the town and is polluting the town's water and is creating unsafe working conditions for the people and not paying them a living wage, I said, I want the government to be able to be big enough to say either stop that or shut them down.
But I would say that it depends on how one defines the government. If you say that question assumes that, as you said, Trump is the government. The people are the government. So if you say, well, actually, what liberals want is more government, but they want it to be more about everybody having something to say about it instead of one.
Because government also includes every person that votes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's all of us.
Everybody that participates in government
But
is government.
but two people who are very libertarian, I did say that's the best explanation of liberalism that I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they didn't come back and attack me, but they said, oh, you know, so I was able to make not all liberals think alike and all have the same storyline and stuff. So I was able to make some headway yesterday. Amazingly.
That's great.
Well, another question, getting back to our trust thing, another question is, what are some things that causes you to lose trust? Not just in, I'm talking about trust with the big T, like everything. If we limit it to just like a encounter I had with someone or something like that, then it kind of gets in the weeds. But I'm looking for kind of the big picture first, so that we can maybe take more stuff away from what really is, you know, what motivates us to feel a certain way about certain things. So in this case, what makes us distrust something, someone?
The lack of aberration. Like when everything gets so consistent, if everybody has the same talking points, if we're all doing the same thing, if we're all adhering to the same things and there's no aberration, then I feel that makes me feel distrustful, because I feel like any deviance from the norm is going to be I don't know, that we're heading towards like I distrust. I don't know. Like everybody ordering off of Amazon is freaking me out. I'm feeling like, you know, everybody feels like, I'm afraid this whole thing is going to make us all be buying everything through Amazon. Like now that, you know, because we have this something about ease that we can all, and we start believing like the whole concept of cheap and ease and all this stuff. And through that, I feel like I don't know. But then through that, then we all start getting all targeted for the things we want and the things that we like. And we all our tastes start turning the same, you know, like, and then, so just the consistency is, which is what builds our trust, ironically, is also what makes me distrustful. You know, like if we get, you know, we all shop at the same stores, we all start looking alike, we all start doing that. That's what's scared me, the consistency thing that should be giving us trust, and it does. And that's how I feel that you get manipulated too.
If I may interject about Amazon, it has so much appeal because it is easy and it I went into it thinking, boy, I can just about get anything like at Alice's restaurant here. But what I think eventually is happening is it actually narrows our choices to where if you can't find it on Amazon because they've decided it's not profitable, well, you're not going to get it anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, shortage of things, I'm not sure whether that's true or not, but all of a sudden and this is maybe a diversion, but the price of dried beans has gone from $1.35 a pound up to $4, $5, $10 if you want to get a bag of beans, and other products. I mean, the prices have just escalated because it's an opportunity for somebody that has the market kind of in their clutches right now.
It's the same thing with the monopoly. I mean, Amazon is going to be the ultimate monopoly once they get control of everything. And not only that, but all the purveyors are forced to make their own cutbacks to fit into their quota. I feel like sorry, I'm getting on a rant because this is trust is on Amazon, because I feel like even those who think like me are still Amazon, are buying the Amazon Prime thing and not thinking about how workers are treated, or, and how they're non-unionized, and how much that's speeding up, like our thrill of getting something, ordering it one day and getting it the next day is so good for us, but not thinking about what it really means in the whole system because it's so blind, because we don't really see what it's really doing. And then not only that, but what I think it's purveyors who are getting all the traffic, but they're getting all these restrictions. I think they're going to cheaper manufacturers. And I really found this out with trying to order a pruning knife, and really I was doing all this stuff about like, I don't want to get this on Amazon, but I'm looking at this, and then finding out that, even Swiss knives, some can be manufactured in Germany and some can be manufactured in China. And that we're doing those name recognition things, but, I think these, that they're doing, that you're going to start getting inferior quality too, because I think it's forcing people to go to cheaper manufacturers that normally we're getting better, and they may leave that for a different market.
To sell the brand or something, and then I have done this. I've continued buying a particular shoe, for instance, that had been really good quality, and then realized down the road that it was not the same shoe. It had the same name on it, but it was made somewhere else with cheaper materials.
Yeah, and that's the cheapening of products is we're not getting it the same product cheaper. The way that the mass production of things, getting more and more and more and more and more and stuffing it into us is also decreasing the quality.
Yeah, paying more
because it's forcing, to adhere to Amazon standards and Walmart and all these things for being purveyors.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have so much product, and they have to get it by this, and it has to fall below this certain dollar amount. It's forcing them, and it's us too, our addiction to cheap things,
Mm-hmm.
and that we're driving down the quality too, because we're following into that same thing for cheap things, when we should be doing fewer things and still going for quality. And that would be my whole thing is with this, if any beautiful thing could come out of this whole pandemic, is really to think about what is really necessary.
Right.
To quit buying. But I think Amazon is trying to sneak in there and,
They're not just trying, they're succeeding.
Yeah.
And they aren't the only ones, but we are really over the top as far as being consumers. We just.
And I got a vintage paper thing off of eBay, which is, all these independent sellers. And when I got the thing that said, oh, we're moving to Amazon, and here's a discount thing, which I'm sure they say, offer everybody this discount. This is for a vintage product. And this means, I'm sure, who's to argue if it's going to maybe Amazon is, if eBay isn't working for them and they can get more traffic, I don't know. You know, but I'm like, now they're moving into not only new products, but into old products as
Probably
well.
they're faking them out, you know, reproducing something, and it will still have the appearance of being what you thought you wanted or something. I mean,
So if I'm getting the gist of this conversation, vis-a-vis trust, is that there are things, let's say, practices that people have, policies that companies have, experiences and with people and companies and things that, let's say, getting back to Allison's definition, they create doubt. They create doubt, and they also, to some degree, give us a sense of that they're threatening something that we value. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's say that we discover that something that people do or say or some way they act either toward us or toward others damages our trust, creates doubt. What are some of the things that what could they do to have us regain trust in them? Let's say if we use the previous conversation, like with Amazon, and we say, okay, look, you know, is there something that Amazon could do to regain our trust, to reposition themselves in our mind?
Lawrence, I'm sure that Amazon has a division called Building Trust. They have a whole group of people sitting in there in a room having this very discussion.
Yeah, I am too. I'm positive of that. But I'm using it as a bigger, you know, to look at the bigger picture. Someone damages a relationship with us, and they may want, if they want that relationship to continue, they also are going to have that little department in their head that says, what can I do to regain this trust? But my question is, what are the kinds of things that they could do, or they or Amazon or the bridge builders or whoever, what are the things could they do to rebuild a trust? Or is it once it's lost, they're done?
Well, I think what you talked about at the beginning and with the Zoom, when you're talking about do we trust the Zoom or not, and you said, well, the CEO came on and did a Zoom meeting and says, here's what we are doing, here's how it changed, here's what we were unprepared for, here's how we're trying to fix it. You know, so I think that's the first thing to you know, to regain trust is first the person who broke the trust has to admit, here's my actions, my words, my policies that cause this trust to be broken. So first is admitting, and then hopefully to regain that trust, then they have to follow it up in actions to prove that they are doing it different now.
You mean like after the 2016 election and all the Facebook stuff, and that Zuckerberg came on and said, did you regain trust? You know, when he said, oh, we're going to be, well, maybe, I mean, maybe.
Well, I think it's like he said we're going to do that, but then the question is, as Eno was putting it, do you actually do it? You know, and then, but those are the kind of things I want to explore. Like what kind of things, like whether it's companies or whether it's in between people. You know, if we take Eno's example of an actual individual that you have a relationship with, they do something that causes you to doubt or mistrust them, you know, like what do you expect, or what would encourage you to trust them, Or will
An
you,
act of-
will you always have that a certain level of distrust after that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Back in '96, I was a student pastor in Yankton, and I was visiting one of our elders in the nursing home, and she was talking about how, when she first moved to Yankton herself, that they had to take, it was still pretty young, in the 1920s, so to get to the Twin Cities or anywhere, they'd have to take trains, and her husband had go in for back surgery, and so he took the train to the Twin Cities to get back surgery, but the
Vibrations.
the vibrations, the train was so bumpy that they couldn't do the back surgery, so because it damaged it, and so he wrote a letter to the railroad, and he got a letter back and said, he got 2 pages. The first page was, "Dear so and so, we are sorry to hear this, and we hope that we're continuing to work on this, and we hope that that'll never happen again, and da 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 da." Then the second page was a handwritten note from the CEO or the president or whatever, saying, "Please give this person file number 13, and I never want to hear from this person again." So the secretary included the memo from the president again, probably on purpose.
Intentionally.
Intentionally.
Wow.
Yeah. So do I trust do you trust the secretary in that situation? Oh yeah. Do you trust the president? Never again. Because here in their supposed apologies, they're just trying to get rid of the guy.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, building trust is some selfless act, something that isn't an act of benevolence or something that goes against this momentum of greed, or to something largesse, or something that how would you build trust?
How would you build it after it's broken? Or what would you
Yeah.
accept as what would make you trust or encourage you to trust again after the trust has been broken?
Yeah. Okay. Some supreme act of benevolence. If Jeff Bezos of Amazon said, "You know what? I have enough money. I'm going to make the whole company a co-op, and it's going to be worker owned." Okay, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm stepping down.
Yeah, I'm stepping down. Well, I guess one of the reasons I ask is because sometimes I feel like our bar for gaining trust and regaining trust is a lot higher than our bar for losing trust. And I'm wondering if they shouldn't be at least on the same level.
Would you just let that slow down a little bit, or maybe say it again? It's kind of hard for me to grasp.
Okay. So I'm asking if our bar for gaining and regaining trust once it's lost is higher than our bar for losing trust. In other words, people can work and do lots of things and be our friend a long time and do things, and they do something that makes us lose trust. And that one thing they can lose, but is there one thing that you do that okay, now you regain the trust? So is it harder for us to trust than to mistrust? And
I think that's a very good point, because I think you're absolutely right, and it makes me back up to think like at some point you just have to trust life and the collective will. And we'll take that back to even Amazon. At some point, I have to say, well, this is what people have chosen. And, if I think you have, I mean, it's a fine line to resignation. And, you know, you don't want to be just resigned to an idea that it's the Lord's will and I will just trust that it'll come out right. You know, that's the far extreme, you know, but there is a fine balance of, well, this is what humanity has decided to define. So I'm just along for the ride, and I'll observe and I'll try to do the best, but I can't stew in the wrongness of it, you know, and trust that. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think you're right that we can set these bars so high. Like if you're always worried about getting ripped off, you know, and you can't trust anybody, you know, then that's no way to live. You know, you have to even trust that, so what if you do get ripped off? It's not that big of a deal. You have to look at the bigger picture. So,
well, I think it's not just being ripped off in the commercial sense, but if we take it back to our like personal sense, there are, you know, people work, let's say, really hard to gain our trust, and over time they have gained that trust. And let's say, for example, I've seen cases where someone says something that's untrue, sometimes to protect the person, or because they aren't ready to tell us the truth, or because they don't feel the question you asked them was any of your business, but they don't dislike you as a person. They just feel like the question that you asked them, they don't feel they need to answer that. But rather than tell you to go fuck off, they tell you something that's not quite true. So you interpret that as a lie. Okay, so you say that person lied to me. So now you distrust them because they lied to you. That was an easy thing to do to gain your distrust. But that somehow it can overwhelm cancel out all the other things that a person did to gain the trust. So I'm wondering about that.
Connie's been trying to get in here.
Trying to be polite. I just think that it's easier to learn to trust somebody, but once that trust has been gone, it's much harder to get trust back again.
which is kind of what you were.
See, I'm thinking that it's hard to gain trust too, that people often work really hard to gain people's trust, to be trustworthy. People aren't perfect, and so they're going to, and the more we interact with people, the more opportunities they have to do things to cause us to distrust them. And so I'm wondering if it works for us individually, for it to be easier for us to mistrust someone than to trust them. I mean, I can make a case for either way, but I'm just calling that question.
Well, when our president was elected, I didn't trust him, but I thought I would give him a chance. But he has not proved to me that he has anything trustworthy about him. And I will never be able to trust him again, no matter what he does anymore. I will never be able to trust him, ever. I tried to give him a chance when he first came, but I can't anymore. And I will never allow myself to trust him again. I shouldn't say it again, because I really didn't trust him before, but
But I can trust that maybe this is what culture needed, was Donald Trump, I don't know, to wake up, or I don't know, or to question or to think about something. I can trust that maybe, so then that's a weird form of trust in Donald Trump that he's a mirror or of who we are, and maybe that's necessary without trusting him. So maybe even with your sisters, you can trust that maybe there will be something important that can come from this whole process without fully trusting their actions. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, I'm just trying to think how do you, you know, balance those trusts, put the trusts and mistrusts, you know, like shift them in the bigger scheme of things.
Well, I trust Donald Trump to be Donald Trump, you know, just like I trust that if I drop a lead ball, it will fall, you know. So if I look at like all the things, you know, if he's predictable, even though people say, oh, he's unpredictable. Yeah, he's predictable. You know, you can predict pretty much what he's going to do every time. Because if nothing else, he's consistent, you know? So yeah, I trust him but do I trust him to look after the interest of all Americans? Well, he's never done anything to do that, to show that. So that would be foolhardy to expect him to now suddenly be a different person, you know? So, but I trust him to be Donald Trump.
But do you trust our political structure to withstand his abuse of power?
No, no. I won't say it won't or can't, but do I trust that it will? I don't. I see too many cracks in the structure. And as you pointed out, he's exposed those cracks in the structure by putting stress on them where they never had stress before. Because certain institutions have failed us, certain expectations that we had of fellow Americans have failed us. And so by putting stress on those structures, we now can see where they were weak, where we didn't see that before. We didn't see all of these certain things in the government that allowed, there were like understandings that were had. Now we're learning that there are security things that even Congress didn't know that they were there, but they were there, that circumvented a lot of things that we assumed that was like cut in stone. We didn't know that they were there, but without Donald Trump, we never would have found that because those stresses had never been put on the structure. He's stressing the structure like it's never been stressed before. Do I believe that we can hold up to it? I don't have trust in that. I'm not so sure that we will come out well in this.
Well, it's kind of like what somebody said about once you've introduced Agent Orange into warfare, there's no going back. You know, once you lower the standard, you know, then it's just part of it, you know, like.
Yeah. Well, you can, it's not so much going back. You can re-devise something. You can determine that this thing is a threat and we need to come together to make it not a threat and never again. I asked a question many years ago, and the person I asked it to was George McGovern. That was the first person I asked to. I mean, in a face-to-face thing, I asked, what is the thing that we can do to neutralize violence? And the look he gave to me was, that's a ridiculous question. And my reaction was, look, if we can't do that, then talking about all of the things that we'll do to deal with violence becomes kind of a moot point, because as long as violence is the trump card, then it says that all of us should be as violent as we can, because without that, we can't do all of these other nice things. So if we can't neutralize it, you know, then we're done here. So if we go back to like, well, okay, well, what do we do? What do we do now? then I think Donald Trump put the stress on us that said we have to find something to do about what do we do that Agent Orange doesn't change anything. What can we do to take that off the table as a solution?
So the ultimate trust question is, do you trust humanity?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's the ultimate thing. I mean, do you mean do I trust? I don't. Maybe I don't understand your question.
Do you trust humanity to be able to bear all the stress and the cracks and to rise above it? You know, because it's going to take, you know, now, I don't know, just to overcome, you know, or do you trust humanity to reconcile with the earth, you know, like to find that there has to be a balance, or is everything just about the trajectory we're on, that we just kind of bigger, more grabbing, you know, the greediness of humanity?
I think we have the potential, and doing these kind of things that I'm doing right now is trying to crowdsource. How do we use that potential? What can each of us do, you know, to push humanity forward? Because I don't think it's a one-shot thing that somebody waves a magical wand. It's the granular stuff that we do every day to each other and with each other that makes a difference, I think.
That's true, because I mean, those are the things, is not giving up. Is there are, I mean, we're definitely better off now than we ever were, I think, in humans' lifetime, and we're also have the potential to be more destructive than we've ever had, you know. But on a human level, you know, there's a lot of amazing things that socially that are going on, and so you can't always put, you know, sometimes if we listen to media, you know, it's really about disconnecting ourselves from media too, somewhat. Then that means that's the end all. That's how we're judged, just through our social media, through our political system is based on the media that tells us how it's doing, you know. And, you know, well, it's like a disconnect from that is like, if you, and put your efforts and, like you're saying, in building those things that you do admire about humanity, and hope that that can spread just as much as a virus can, you know.
I think that's exactly what I've been learning from visiting with Lawrence and being involved with him, and actually all of us who know each other here before we knew you, Allison, is finding ways to connect with people who live next door or across the street or downtown in ways that we haven't been doing. It's easy enough to do, really, and it's so rewarding. And it builds a strength, the fibers of our being where we are. That's where my hope lies now. That, and, you know, certain other things like trying to get more people to register and to vote. Not being afraid to put my feet down on the ground and stand up and say, this is wrong. Because we're surrounded here by people whose political actions and thoughts, or not thoughts, just actions, are opposed greatly to the things that I stand for. So it's trying to build up that kind of muscle against the bad and the distrust that the people have toward me. I have to own that. I have to realize that not everybody agrees with my way of feeling and thinking. I had a real eye opener, and I'm pondering it after about 2 days, how to best handle it. A lady I don't know well, but I like her. We have things in common. And she got very upset by some things that were being said on Facebook in something that I had posted. And she, obviously, it bothered her, but she cared enough about me and about herself to bring it to me privately and say, this really destroyed my perception of people who I know are intelligent, and I want to admire them, but now this destroys that. Or, you know, I'm paraphrasing. She put it very well. It took me a while to decide how to answer her, and I told her that. I said, I hope that the fact that my intentions were not to destroy your faith in me as a decent human being. I do have a sense of decency, but sometimes, although I try not to do it, I kind of lose my mind because of the frustration. It was trying, you know, it's right now with all of these news conferences, so-called, that go on and on. And I do shut them off because otherwise I end up yelling profanities in the silence of my home at people who will never care what I think of them. So I thanked her, and I said, you know, pretty much what I've said. I feel we have enough common ground between us that we can remain on good terms and be friends and build a friendship on those things we already know we have in common, which one of them is art. And so that's, I have to focus on trying to build myself up in that way where I can accept the fact that some people are just, oh, and here's how she ended. Then she thanked me back and she said, you are now feeling what I was feeling for the previous 8 years. And I was just gobsmacked by that. I thought, oh my God, how could anybody feel that way about President Obama? And I can't accept that. It's hard for me because I really, you know, that was, I literally would wake up in the morning and say, thank you that President Obama is President Obama. So for, you know, it's just that disparity is just unfathomable to me, but this is a woman who I respect.
Maybe it's a conversation to continue, because I don't know. I say that, I think they're really hard to do, but just that as an exercise alone, and just with one person, might be even more powerful than what we can do on a bigger scale. You know, like, and you know, I've gotten in those conversations, and I don't know if they ever made it make a difference or do anything, you know, but just to get down to.
Well, I have in my life probably, I know one other one that I have really made a decision to keep the waters as smooth and as welcoming before her as I could. And I'd say it's probably been a couple of years. And she continues to interact with me and avidly appreciates what I do and thanks me. And we share the things that we can share. We don't talk about politics. Once in a while, she'll put something over there, but she has a lot of other people who can agree with her or disagree with her. And I just won't do it because I feel I need to clear the air of that kind of thing for my well-being, and also to give this woman I'm speaking of, that I've been doing this with for a couple of years, because I've known her for a long time, but to give her a safe way to change her mind. I will never ridicule her for anything she's said, and if she decides to do a 180, it won't really change the way I welcome her, because I already welcome her as a friend. And I told her, I love you, I value you, you have a lot of, there's some history here, then let's keep it that way. So I do believe it changes. Maybe it's only 2 people in my life right now, but that's 2. I don't think she goes and talks behind my back about anything.
Yeah, I think, and finding the ways, nurturing the ways that you do agree. There's little things that you can seep in, like what integrity means, what telling, just,
Well, I try to show
like, because with Trump, it's his rhetoric is just like, if nothing else, policy is another thing. We can agree on that because that's strategy, I guess, in some way for what, and you can both still think for the common good of humanity, but.
Well, one thing I decided a couple years ago, pretty much, I guess, it's hard for me, but I've decided to, usually I never even say his name because I really do despise the man, and that's not, I also pity him because I believe he's a character disorder, and I don't think he chose to be that, and I'm not sure he can choose not to be that. But I had to give up as much as I can, my feelings of anger about him, because that doesn't help me and it doesn't help anything else. So I'm trying to be an example of inclusiveness and acceptance of people who don't agree with me. Good luck on that. Huh?
Well, it's it's already past the time that I was planning to do this. I have to do some other things. It's been really a pleasure to share some ideas with you guys. I'm hoping that you'll stay tuned for more discussions. I like to have different people's points of view. And I think we've shared some different ones here today, and maybe even personally come up with some new points of views. So I invite you guys to stay tuned, and I'll see what we come up with next.